So welcome to this afternoon's program, Jewish Life in American Cinema. We all know the Jewish men and women who have been on the other side of the camera, movie studios, making movies on the business side, but what's to me even more interesting is the way over the years American cinema has depicted Jewish life. And we have two really excellent people who've spent a lot of their careers working in cinema. Ruth and Peter Stein, not related, by the way. Ruth Stein is a longtime San Francisco Chronicle movie critic and correspondent, and she's also the force behind the Mostly British Film Festival. If you don't know about it, it's coming up in February, and they just secured Malcolm McDowell as one of the opening guests. So I would suggest you go to mostlybritish.org and see what's happening. Peter Stein, of course, was the director of the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival, is a senior producer of Frameline, and knows more about film than almost anybody I know. Today's program, Stereotypes, is the first in a 4-part series. So Ruth and Peter will be doing these programs over the course of 4 afternoons here through the spring. If you haven't signed up for the other ones, there's still time for you to do that, and we hope that you will, because there's even more material than we could possibly cover in 4 afternoons, but believe me, there's plenty of good and juicy stuff to see. So the way it's going to work this afternoon, so you know, is Peter will come out and do the initial presentation, followed by Ruth, and then there will be an opportunity for all of you to ask questions. So now, without further ado, please welcome Peter Stein.
Thank you, Barbara. It's great to be here. I'm sorry that stature and jeans have made it such that I'm hiding a little bit behind the podium. But unlike some of the movie stars in some of the films that we'll be seeing, I am not working on a box, so you will have to permit me to just be the height that I am. It's great to see you all. Thank you for coming out and either missing the end of the last playoff game or actively ignoring it, which is probably what you were doing. As Barbara mentioned, we're taking a look, Ruth and I, over the course of these 4 separate classes, or lectures, or talks, or conversations, at different themes in American Jewish life that have come forward through the movies, basically trying to see how the movies have depicted the transitions and transformations of lives of American Jews. And it's an interesting window. The movies are an interesting window through which to see the development of Jewish life, how Jews portrayed themselves, since many actors and many behind-the-scenes folks in the movies are or were Jewish, and to some degree also to see what the impression was that the movies were leaving to audiences around the country of what Jewish life was like. And the rise of the great population of Jews in America rose significantly and developed almost in parallel with the development of movies as a technology. So it's an interesting window to take a look at. But we're doing this not so much chronologically, but through themes. So the programs or the classes or the topics are separable. You can do them a la carte. I hope many of you do come back, though, for the rest of our programs. Today we're talking a little bit about stereotypes, and I thought we might do a little bit of a definition of terms here. What is a stereotype? I relied on one of the most wonderful and in a way seminal, I think that's a gendered term, which I should probably find another way to express it. Somebody can come up with that. An important scholar named Patricia Ahrens, in her book, The Jew in American Cinema, helped to make some distinctions. Because the things that we're going to be talking about today, both Ruth and I, are to some degree stereotypes, which are often considered to be negative images. But what I'm particularly interested in is what we might also think of as archetypes. An archetype is sort of a model or a pattern that sets a mold for future either duplication, replication, or when it becomes extreme, we can talk about then them as being stereotypes. So, for example, the stern patriarch is a type that we see in Jewish film almost from the beginning of Jewish film. The archetype of that might, in fact, be biblical. Abraham would be sort of the archetype of the stern patriarch. And what Patricia Aaron says is that in Jewish film, Jewish subject cinema, or films that have portrayed Jews as characters, we sometimes see stereotypes, but just as often we see stock characters or character types. And some of those that arose almost immediately in the course of the advent of film, which of course began basically around the turn of the 20th century, are some of the following. These are taken in many cases from the stereotypes or types of characters that we would have seen in literature produced mainly by non-Jews about Jews. Some of these stereotypes are, of course, extreme and negative. We think of particularly the Jew as villain, Shylock, the moneylender, Fagin, the evil sort of predatory pawnbroker, and some of them are reactions against those depictions. So, for example, the virtuous or moral Jew, the pious Jew. Again, these are not necessarily based in the reality of Jews as they lived their lives, but in fact are simply shorthand ways that Jewish characters appeared in literature, in theater, as I say, usually produced by non-Jews. The positive example, for example, of the moral or pious Jew that helped change the template a bit from what was known in English language literature anyway, from Shakespeare and Dickens and so forth, was George Eliot's Daniel Deronda, who was one of the first characters in literature to show up as a not just morally committed, but simultaneously contemporary Jew living in the world not as the other, but as an English citizen. We also had stereotypes, not necessarily negative, of the exotic beauty. We can go back again to Jessica in The Merchant of Venice, and then a kind of complicated one, the wanderer or peddler, or a kind of the parasite Jew who really does not have a place in society, but is simply living off the others. And it's really unfortunate that so many of these stereotypes persisted in literature and in theater, and luckily, in a way, it came to film to begin to set some of these stereotypes on their head. So why did that happen? How did Jews present themselves as they began to make Jewish film? One of the reasons that was able to happen at all is that, as I mentioned, the rise of cinema as a technology coincided in the United States with the extraordinary increase of Jews in the United States to begin with. Remember, film as a medium was invented in the late 1890s in France, quickly made a transition to technologies here in the United States in the first decades of the 20th century. What was happening on the East Coast in particular at that time? 2 million Eastern Europeans of Jewish descent come into the United States, mainly through Ellis Island, coming with their own heritage of stories. Of course, stock characters and stereotypes in Jewish literature as well, but far different from the stories and stereotypes that would have been seen and read on stages and in literature produced by non-Jews. Some of the characters who came, I say characters, these are real people, came with names that we don't recognize as we see them on the screen, but I'm curious how many of you can name who they became. Who comes to Ellis Island? Benjamin Wernereski. Anybody want to guess who that is? Not Yul Brynner, much earlier. Benjamin Werner, who fathered 4 sons, who became the Werner brothers, yes. Asa Jolson, Al Jolson, we'll see him in a minute. Shmuel Gelbfish, Samuel Goldwyn, who early in his career in New York actually went by the name Samuel Farb, and then he went less ethnic to Goldwyn. I don't know. And here's a trick one. Anzia Jezierska changed her name to Anzia Jezierska. She actually didn't change her name at all. We'll talk about her in a moment. We'll talk about her in a moment. Very, very important figure in Jewish literature and a little bit in film as well. So what these and other Jewish filmmakers begin doing as they start to make movies is, of course, they rely, first of all, on the stock characters, the types that Patricia Ahrens mentions, trying to make a distinction between negative stereotypes and stock characters. Who do we find showing up in some of the early Jewish films of the first couple decades of the 20th century? Many of them taken from the melodramas and Yiddish and other Jewish-oriented literature of the time. You have the stern patriarch. I should say, many of these characters are reflective of the struggle and the attempt of this first generation of Jews entering the United States to assimilate. And so the conflict and the dramas and the melodramas and sometimes the comedy of Jewish fictional production, we're talking mainly about film here, comes from that tension of old world meeting new. So you'll find the stern patriarch. You will find the long-suffering mother. Now, Ruth in her talk is going to talk much more about how that long-suffering mother sort of evolved a bit into the suffocating mother over the course of 100 years of Jewish content cinema. You have something related a bit to the exotic beauty, but the Rose of the Ghetto. This is the character in Jewish and Yiddish melodrama, as well as in some of the early silent films, of the beautiful young girl who is kind of the flower of the ghetto. You have an important figure in this early stage of a Jewish film, the immigrant greenhorn. That is the person who is easily taken advantage of by the wise, streetwise, mainly, again, Jewish characters who are taking advantage of this innocent who's come knowing nothing about the real life on the streets mainly of New York. And we're going to see examples of some of these in a moment with a clip or two. And then a very important figure as well. Again, absolutely biblical, but turning into something that has a specifically cinematic turn in The Prodigal Son. This is often the figure who rubs up against the stern patriarch, wanting to assimilate. So in a sense, what The Prodigal Son in film is doing is evidencing the struggle to adapt to modern ways, to give up the old language, to basically run off from the traditions of the family, and to find some, if not compromise, then at least some way to appease the needs of the family structure, the stern patriarch and the long-suffering mother, to compromise somehow and say, we can both be modern and hold on to some of our traditions. And you'll see over the course of cinema how the early films mimic many of the early Yiddish melodramas and comedies in really pulling the prodigal son back into the family, whereas in later years and later films, the prodigal son often would be victorious by essentially leaving behind the family and adapting fully, assimilating fully into American life. One of the earliest and best examples of many of these, and I won't call them stereotypes, because Hungry Hearts, does anybody know this film or story? A few of you? Let me tell you briefly about Anzia Jezierska. I will try not to twist my tongue too much and break it by having to pronounce her name too often. Anzia Jezierska was a writer who wrote stories, mainly short stories and some novels, of life in the Eastern European ghetto or Lower East Side world of factories and sweatshops. And she wrote stories that refused to hew only to the stereotypical melodramatic arcs that would often be portrayed on the Yiddish stage. And she became known as the Sweatshop Cinderella because her stories became extremely popular. And it was none other than Samuel Goldwyn who decided that one of the stories that she'd written, called Hungry Hearts, was worthy of adaptation. And he was so taken by the stories that she was telling of life on the Lower East Side that he actually said, "You, Anzia, can have a career in film. We need stories like yours." And he flew her out to Los Angeles and paid her $100,000. We're talking about in like 1919. It's crazy. She was at the time the highest paid woman writing in the movies, doing scenarios that she was being encouraged to be based on the world that she knew from the Lower East Side. But it was like taking a rose out of a rose garden. She felt bereft of her sources in Los Angeles and ultimately turned down that contract and went back to New York and continued to write, not so much for cinema, but in literature. She's sadly not that well known a figure now. Her stories are fantastic. And the one that she wrote that was adapted into a screenplay and then filmed is called Hungry Hearts. That's probably what put her on the map for most Americans. And it is a story set absolutely dead center on the Lower East Side. Was one of the first silent films shot on location on the Lower East Side. And what's remarkable about it is that it takes some of the types that we've begun to see peppered all of Yiddish melodrama and some of the early silent movies, but doesn't reduce them to stereotypes. So it's the story of a family. The first several scenes are set in the old country. You see them suffering terribly under Cossacks and hearing news from the New World that the streets of New York are paved with gold, and the family, and headed by a very pious patriarch, manages to get enough money together to come to New York. And so I'm going to show you a couple of scenes. I think it's mainly one continuous sequence, but I'm going to show you 3 quick scenes from it. And when we first meet this family after they've moved, we see the reality that they've had to deal with when they first come to New York. You see, she starts to use a little bit of the humor that is also expected now of Jewish cinema. I'm going to go a little bit forward. Again, what I like to point out here is that you have, first of all, it's really a matriarch. The mother is going to be the driver of this family, and they want to make possible the piety and the studies of the father. Go a little bit forward. Now they're going to meet for the first time their grasping landlord. All of these characters are Jewish, by the way. This was a mainstream film made by Samuel Goldwyn, or produced by him, but meant absolutely for a mainstream audience. And the Rose of the ghetto, the young daughter, has become friendly with his nephew. and he sees that the mother has repainted her kitchen white, which is her great dream that she's done. The nephew. So you see, the tension here is not so much between the old world and the new world, but as much between the grasping new world and what it's going to take for this family to assimilate into it. So the family leaves, and the landlord, as a last little dig to the mother, says, "Since you've got such a nice new kitchen here, I'm going to triple your rent." And this is her response, which is, again, I think, one of the more electrifying things ever to show up in silent cinema. It goes on, believe me. So this is a very, very non-stereotypical view of life, of immigrant life, and that's what I love about the film. It turns many of these stereotypes on their head. She actually takes control of her own situation, even in a completely mad or demented way. I think I'm not, there we go, I can take that away. Luckily, Mama comes to her senses, and they do get, with the help of the young nephew, they are able to actually move out of the ghetto, and when you see them at the end of the film, they're in this kind of leafy suburban thing, probably in the Bronx. But they make it out of the Lower East Side. But it's one of the most interesting examples to me of a rose-colored glasses view of ghetto life, which we've come to sort of forget actually was being depicted during that period. Another milestone in Jewish subject cinema and cinema types that happened just a few years after Hungry Hearts is, of course, The Jazz Singer. The Jazz Singer was a story, again, written for the stage by Samson Raphaelson, who grew up on the Lower East Side, and he had an experience of he had attended the Pike Street Synagogue in New York, and his whole milieu was Jewish. And he was deeply affected when he went to see a show starring a young jazz entertainer named Al Jolson, whose versatility and whose plaintive singing really made Samson Raphaelson feel like he was listening as much to a cantor as he was to a jazz singer. And he wrote the story of a cantor's son who wants to be an American jazz entertainer. Now, Jolson's story was not all that different from the one that was told in the movie. He himself, as we saw, was born Asa Jolson. He was the sixth generation in a line of cantors. But the author, Samson Raphaelson's story, which he adapted into a play, when it was produced in New York as a theater piece, did not star Al Jolson, but rather George Jessel. Some of you may remember George Jessel had a very, very thick Eastern European accent, and he was very recognizable as a Jewish actor. This was great for the New York stage, but when it came time to adapt the film, which was going to be the Warner Brothers' huge investment in the talkies, the first talking film ever, the Warner Brothers themselves did not want so identifiable a Jewish face or voice to play the role of Jack Rabinowitz, and so they cast the extremely popular sort of crossover entertainer Al Jolson. And so there was a lot riding on this film to be attractive to mainstream audiences. As I say, a huge risk for the Warner Brothers to be putting this up as the first Vitaphone film that had actual. It's interesting. People think of The Jazz Singer as being fully a talking film. It's not. The musical sequences are sync sound. That is, they actually were using recording on the soundstage to capture the voices of the singers. But the dialogue is almost entirely shot as if the dialogue scenes as if it were a silent movie, and so it sort of bops back and forth between these two modes. In terms of stereotypes or presentation of Jewish characters, we have some absolute classic ones. We have, again, the stern patriarch, the prodigal son, big time, and the long-suffering mother, all three in contest. But this time, the struggle really is about assimilation and modernity. In the play, it's very clear at the end that Jack Robin is coming back to his family to sing the Kol Nidre and to essentially reconcile with the family. It's much less clear in the movie, let alone the adaptations that happen in the 50s and then again in the 70s, that reconnection with the family tradition is going to happen. It's a more personal connection, but not that the Jack Robin character is actually going to be a cantor. So let's take a look at one scene in which you will see some of these recognizable types. And again, try to put yourself back in the mind of audiences in 1927 hearing the human voice for the first time talking in sync from the screen. So he's been away life for 10 years. He hasn't seen his mother in 10 years. He's made a success for himself in Chicago, and he's come back to New York to tell her he's going to come star in a play in New York. He's changed his name to Jack Robin. This is sync sound.
Blue sky, smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see. Oh, to, bluebirds singing a song, nothing but little bluebirds all day long. I never saw the sun shining so bright, never saw things going so right, noticing the day hurrying by. When you're in love, oh, don't they fly? Blue days, days, all of them gone. Nothing but blue skies from now on. You like that, Mama? Yes. I'm glad of it. I'd rather please you than anybody I know of. Oh, darling, will you give me something? What? You'll never guess. Shut your eyes, Mama. Shut them for little Jackie. Oh, I'm going to steal something. I'll give it back to you someday, too. You see if I don't. Mama, darling, if I'm a success in this show, well, we're going to move from here. Oh, yes, we're going to move up in the Bronx. A lot of nice green grass up there and a whole lot of people you know. There's the Ginsbergs, the Guttenbergs, and the Goldbergs. Oh, a whole lot of birds. I don't know them all. And I'm going to buy you a nice black silk dress, Mama. You see, Mrs. Friedman, the butcher's wife, she'll be jealous of you. Oh, no. Yes, she will. You see if she isn't. And I'm going to get you a nice pink dress that'll go with your brown eyes. No,
What do you mean, no? Who is telling you? What do you mean, no? Yes, you'll wear pink or else. Or else you'll wear pink. And, darling, oh, I'm going to take you to Coney Island.
Yeah?
Yes, I'm going to ride on the chute-to-chute. Oh. And, you know, in the dark mill.
Yeah?
Ever been in the dark mill?
Oh, no, I would...
Well, with me, it's all right. I'll kiss you and hug you, you see if I don't. Now, Mama, stop now. You're getting kittenish. Mama, listen, I'm going to sing this like I will if I go on the stage, you know, with this show. I'm going to sing it jazzy. Now, get this. Blue sky, smiling at me, me. Nothing but little blue skies do I see. Do. Bluebird singing a song. Nothing but little bluebird all day long. You like that flapping business? Never saw the sun shining so bright. Never saw things going so right. Noticing the days hurrying by. When you're in love, oh, don't they fly? Blue days, all of them gone. Nothing but if that face doesn't say everything about the clash between tradition and modernity, I don't know what does. So that, well, I don't know, is this a stereotype? Is it an archetype? All three characters form this very, very tense triangle that we see being played over and over and over again in the course of Jewish cinema, that tension between tradition and assimilation, between the old world and the new. And again, this is made for a mainstream audience, but where, of course, the Warner Brothers and everybody else who was writing it were hoping that these patterns could be seen throughout all of the kind of melting pot of America. And you flash forward to a film like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and you see many of the same tensions between old ways and new. I probably need to go a little bit faster than I am so that I don't cut off Ruth. I wanted to mention briefly, I won't show you a clip from Hester Street, but what's interesting about this film, which is made in 1975, is that it shows the beginning of a softening of our own attitudes about what life was like in the Lower East Side. for Joan Micklin Silver, the maker, and her mother and grandmother, the last thing that they would have done in the older generations was to romanticize the world of the Lower East Side. And Joan Micklin Silver doesn't sugarcoat it, but she does paint a very, very affectionate portrait of what life would have been like for this first generation of immigrants. But she gives the characters, again, with a very contemporary sensibility, she gives them much more to play than simply the stereotypes or the stock characters that we saw. You do have the put-upon wife and the playboy husband, but not only the roles, but the storylines that they get to play are much, much more complex. And it ushered in a generation of filmmakers, both in the independent mode, like Joan Micklin Silver, and also in mainstream Hollywood, who were beginning to play with upturning or playing topsy-turvy with some of the stereotypes or stock characters that we'd begun to see. I'm going to just pass this one and begin to talk about another set of stereotypes. You saw in some of the early silent films and the early talkies the kind of nebbish scholar, the person who was devoted to the book, who was. There were literally scenes in Hungry Hearts where one of the characters, who's like the son of the family next door, would be going around the streets of New York with a bundle of books tied to his back, and one reading where he'd be bumped, and this was sort of typical of how Jewish masculinity was portrayed as basically something that was shut off or cut off from the actual the sexual tensions of what an adolescent would normally be experiencing. And some of these characteristics of the schlemiel and the nebbish were then wonderfully turned on their heads by Woody Allen, who became known for writing what in some ways are stereotypical characters, but where inevitably you're rooting for him at the same time. So I want to show you one or two clips from what we now tend to think are a stereotype invented by Woody Allen, but simply ones that he perfected. First of all, we should probably, again, definition of terms. Schlemiel, you know, the traditional thing is to say the schlemiel spills the soup on the schlemazel. The schlemiel is a bungler, somebody who's not necessarily likable at all. We think that the later iterations of the schlemiel, we'll meet Woody Allen's Virgil Starkwell here in a moment, who he wrote not as a necessarily Jewish character, but then he gives them these parents who are so embarrassed of him and his exploits that they have to go on camera in nose and glasses. And that, by the way, those characters that were shot here, Henry Leff, dear departed, just died a couple of years ago, and Esther Sokolow play his very clearly Jewish parents. So Woody Allen's schlemiel of Virgil Starkwell is somebody who becomes, in a way, like an anti-hero, somebody who cannot pull off the simplest bank robbery. So let's see that clip here.
Destitute and in love, Virgil attempts to change his life with one bold stroke.
And if you'll just take this to window number 9. What does this say?
Can't you read that?
I can't read this. What's this? Act natural?
No, it says, please put $50,000 into this bag and act natural.
It does say act natural.
So I am pointing a gun at you.
That looks like gub. That doesn't look like gun.
No, it's gun.
No, that's gub. That's a B.
No, see, that's an N. It's G-U-N. It's gun.
George, would you step over here a moment, please? What does this say?
Please put $50,000 into this bag and act natural. What's act?
Act.
Does this look like gub or gun?
Gun.
See?
But what's apt mean?
It's act. A-C-T. Act natural. Please put $50,000 into this bag. Act natural. It's not...
Oh, I see. This is a holdup.
Yes.
May I see your gun? have to have this note initialed by one of our vice presidents before you can give me any money.
See, I'm in a rush.
What?
I'm in a rush.
I'm sorry, but that's our policy. The gentleman in the gray suit.
That's G-U-N. I'm pointing. Yes,
Well, that's a B. That's
I'm pointing
gub.
a gun at you.
Gun.
That's G-U-N.
Well, that's
gun.
a B. That's gub.
No, excuse me. That's an N.
Miss Frank.
I am pointing a gun at you. Apt, natural.
No, that's
What
act.
is apt?
That's act.
Oh, it couldn't be. That's
Yes.
a plain B.
No. I'm afraid not. That's act natural, and
Oh,
I'm
it
pointing a
just
gun at you.
Mr. Miller.
I am pointing a gub.
No, that's gun. That's G-U-N. That's gun. I am pointing a gun at you.
G-U-B.
No. It looks like a B, but it's an
this
N.
one isn't right here. It says A-B-T.
No, that's
Yes, of course it is.
I say it's
It's a
gub.
gub.
No, it isn't.
Well, the two of us now. Let's say it's
It
gub.
isn't act.
This man came over
It has to be.
Yes, we
I'm
discussed
sorry,
this
but I-
inside just a short while
We
ago.
were there at the
Read.
window, and
Oh, I
it's
think
gun.
it's wrong, too.
If I couldn't read, I would
Hello, Louise. Listen, I can't make our date today. I've got to go up to Boston to give a concert. Well, look, why don't I give you a call in about 10 years.
So Woody Allen, of course, perfected this role of the schlemiel. We've seen it taken to further extremes more recently. Characters like George Costanza, who, again, written like Virgil Starkwell. Supposedly, George Costanza in the Seinfeld series is not Jewish, but sorry. And even more recently, pretty much all the roles of Judd Apatow are kind of bunglers, people who you don't necessarily root for, but who may have some level of endearing quality, which is the endearing piece of it actually comes more in the form of the Nebish. Again, I'm going to skip over one clip I was going to play to you of Broadway Danny Rose, because the character that he plays. Well, I'll just show you the first moment of it, just so you can see.
You know the first time I saw you, Mason?
Oh well, actually, this starts in a
backstage
different scene.
at the
I am gonna skip it. Sorry. Just so that I can show you one last one, which is again one of my favorite films, and it's the reason I'm showing it to you is, again, it's Joan Micklin Silver. Again, we're bookending this with two female directors because I think women Jewish writers, have been more interested in turning around the stereotypes to say there's something more here than just nebbishness or clashes between tradition and modernity. And Crossing Delancey shows contemporary Jews grappling with what does it mean to actually return to the other side, to the Lower East Side. So here's a quick scene. Amy Irving playing a very contemporary Upper West Side Jewish daughter who really doesn't want to get fixed up by her mother's friend, played by Sylvia Miles, with this kind of schlubby guy, played by Peter Riegert. And you'll see, here's a Nebish who turns the character or the stereotype around, and you start to root for him. This is Sylvia Miles.
Talk to us. Give us the picture, yes?
Well, Mrs. Mandelbaum, I don't know. What do you want to know?
Your future, your plans, what you dream about, your thoughts, what you do with yourself, anything.
Well, I'm a pretty happy fella, you know.
He's a
I
pickle
like to get
merchant,
up in the
by
morning
way.
and hear the birds tweet. I put on a clean shirt, walk to shul, make the morning prayers, have a cup of coffee at my friend Shlomo's. 9 o'clock, my door's open. It begins.
And there's something fresh, new, likes the modern way, but he understands what's good.
I got to tell you something, Sam. I've been buying pickles from Chaim for 30 years, maybe. So please, don't hold it against me.
I look at it this way, Mrs. Canner. Whatever happens between us, I'm doing you a favor giving you my pickles. You've been missing the best.
He knows what's what. This is confidence.
So what have you got to say for yourself, Isabel?
Excuse me? Idler. I want to take a peek at the curtains in the living room.
What? What?
He's going to show me how you make them so nice.
I can walk for myself very nicely. Thank you.
Listen,
Yes?
I didn't have anything to do with this. It wasn't my idea.
You feel funny, huh?
This isn't the way I live. This isn't the way I do things.
How do you live?
Well, for one thing, I don't live down here. I live uptown.
Is that right?
1,000,000 miles from here.
This isn't your style.
This isn't my style.
Sometimes you can change your style.
Look, I'm sorry you had to go through this, but my puppy's impossible.
I have this friend, Harry Shipman. Shipman Imports. Locks, caviar, fancy stuff. For years, he used to wear this little brown cap, the brim pulled down. You wondered how he could see. One day, he's crossing the Lancey. This big wind comes. Poof, it's gone. He runs after it, but a truck gets there before he does. He comes into me crying he feels so bad. Harry, I said, here, take $5, go across to Finkel and buy yourself a new one. But do me a favor, forget the brown cap. He goes, he comes back an hour later, he's a new man. A gray felt Stetson, a beauty. The next day, he makes an engagement. Between you and me, he must have given Finkel some Nova on the side. There was no $5 hat.
Man trades some locks for Stetson and gets a bride in the bargain. Very romantic.
Oh, he had his eye on her for a long time, but she couldn't see him. That little brown cap. She couldn't see his eyes.
I love that. She couldn't see his eyes because of the brown cap. And that's Joan Micklin Silver's way of saying that sometimes we can't see past stereotypes. And so she's written this wonderful scene and this wonderful character played by Peter Riegert of somebody who on the surface may be like the Nebish scholar who gets bumped on the streets of the Lower East Side, or maybe like the Broadway Danny Rose character or Virgil Starkwell, but where there's something deeper underneath as long as we can make a human connection. And that's the role, I think, of stock characters and character types is when you can see something that gets flipped and we get some insight into what a more complex human being's like. So that's it for my part of the presentation. Thank you. And I'm very excited that, thank you. I'm very excited that, to hear what Ruthe Stein has to say. So please welcome my friend and colleague, Ruthe Stein. Yes. Oh.
Hi. I've been listening to Peter in the audience, and he really is a hard act to follow, but we'll do our best here. I think that was a good segue to see Amy Irving in the film, because one of the points I want to make is that these stereotypes are not always negatives, and particularly with the Jewish American princess, who's fondly known as a Jap. Is usually portrayed as lovely and strong-willed, the kind of woman who would naturally get her way. It's interesting in the casting. Most of the clips we'll be seeing, the Jewish role is played by a Jewish actor because there were enough Jews to go around and because they often understood the role. Maybe they had grown up under the watchful eye of a Jewish mother or watched their father turn into an altar cocker. It's always hard to say that word. I think I'm going to get bleeped. But by the time these movies were made, Jewish actors were not afraid to own up to their religion. In the past, many had changed their names, not because they were hiding the fact that they were Jewish, but because they didn't want to be so limited, as in the case with Kirk Douglas, because nobody could pronounce his name, which was, I'm going to try, but it was Izor Delakovich Dembski. So that would be hard on the marquee, right? And Lauren Bacall, who we just lost recently, was Betty Jean Persky. And Tony Curtis, who I had the honor of interviewing right here on this stage, well, he grew up as Bernard Schwartz. The corollary of them wanting to play all manner of roles is to wonder if Jewish roles should be restricted to Jews. But to my mind, the question is, are they believable? So Ally McGraw isn't Jewish, but she was totally believable as a Jap in Goodbye Columbus. Natalie Wood was completely unbelievable in a similar role in Marjorie Morningstar, and casting Renee Zellweger as a bride in a Hasidic community did not increase the credibility of A Price Above Rubies. Jewish mothers have appeared in films since their earliest days. In silent films, you could hear her kvetching. You could not hear her kvetching, but you could see her unhappiness, which we saw in some of these clips that Peter's shown, in the expression on her face. She was a symbol of Jewish victimization and their resilience and strength in fighting against poverty. These earliest silent films often dealt with the hardship for Jewish immigrants in New York. It fell in the laps of the mother to be sure a meal was on the table, no matter what the dire financial straits. Sharon Reaver from the National Center for Jewish Film said that in silent films, Jewish mothers were symbols of victimization and their resilience and strength and fighting against poverty. This stereotype of the long-suffering Yiddishka mother grew in Yiddish cinema in movies with titles like A Letter to Mother, Where Was My Child, and Mothers of Today. You could tell the setup. Her child was not behaving in a way that was being condoned by the family, and she felt underappreciated for the advice she gave him, a feeling that could develop into rage. The relationship usually was between a son and a mother, not a daughter, because in immigrant families, usually the expectation was always higher for a boy, the prince of the household, that there was more opportunity for discontent. When Hollywood turned to the Jewish mother, there was a dynamic at play audiences might not have been aware of. Most of the studios, as Peter has shown, were run by Jews, and many of them had been raised by Jewish mothers. The stereotype of her as a nagging, loud, highly talkative, overprotective, smothering, and overbearing mother who takes over her children's lives, even when they are grown, was all too familiar, and creating characters like them from the movies could have been a kind of payback. At any rate, these women usually don't come across very well. An exception, however, was when Mama was cooking. She was often shown making food and urging her children to eat more, and so this is a somewhat affectionate portrayal. Film scholar Nathan Abrams said that in the 1960s, the Jewish mother became associated with Jews' impotency, neurosis, and guilt. The post-war American Jewish creation of the Jewish mother was not the affectionate picture of earlier years. She was blamed for the Jews' own sense of vulnerability and emasculation, impotency, or anyway, in Portnoy's complaint, that's what he tells his shrink about her. Maternal overdependence, hypochondria, and undue fearfulness was all the fault of the mother who had raised this boy. Woody Allen has made the Jewish mother a stock character in his movies. They show up as long-suffering and manipulative, and the more they are that way, the more grotesque their sons become. My favorite is the Jewish mother in Take the Money and Run, who participates in the roasting of her son in a mock documentary, remembered because both she and her husband are wearing Groucho masks. But Woody's most grotesque mother appears in New York Stories. This is a very interesting movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Not the kind of film that we see done very often. So Woody, Martin Scorsese, and Francis Ford Coppola each contributed a short film to this bigger film, and the theme was on New York. Woody's is called Oedipus Rex, that's W-R-E-C-K-S. And he stars in it as a Manhattan lawyer named Sheldon, who's been having problems with his overly critical mother, played by the great Mae Questel. He wishes out loud that she would disappear, and then he takes her to a magician who makes her do just that. Sheldon gets used to the idea and rather likes it when, to his horror, his mother reappears in the sky over New York City telling everyone about his deficiencies. So let's take a look at this clip.
Sheldon, where have you been? I've been looking all over for you. I was just discussing your problem with these nice people.
Where are you?
Do I know? Look, Sheldon, I've had plenty of time to think about it. Don't get married.
Not here.
Why should you rush in?
This is not the place to discuss it.
Where should I go? I'm here. You think a man his age should get married? They only met 6 months ago.
It depends. If she's a nice girl, why not?
She's nice, but why do they have to rush in? He's still paying alimony.
Mother, stop.
Let them lead their own lives.
I have the same problem with my daughter. They grow up and they think they have all the answers.
How old is your daughter?
26.
You got any pictures?
Home.
home. I always carry Sheldon around wherever I go.
Oh, God, this can't be
See?
happening.
Here he is.
I need air.
2 years
I need
old.
oxygen.
And I'm
I gotta get out in the fresh air. I need cyanide.
You can't show pictures. And isn't he a darling? Look at him. I've got
This is my granddaughter.
My daughter's wedding. My daughter's wedding. That's my daughter. It's her husband.
Here I am.
Me.
Hello, Dorothy. This is Mr. Mills. I can't come in today. Tell Mr. Bates that I'm feeling sick. No, it's okay. It's okay.
The woman, Mrs. Sadie Milstein, is a widow and the mother of Sheldon Mills, an attorney with the New York firm of Bates, Phillips,
Notice he's
Tunney,
wearing
and
his
Mills.
name.
Little is known of Sheldon Mills except for the fact that he changed his name and was a bedwetter. Apparently,
Mrs. Milstein, do you have any idea how this happened to you?
My son took me to a magic show to meet his fiancé's children. Does he need children?
Do you think Sheldon should get married?
I definitely believe he should listen to his mother.
Oh, God, the pain, the humiliation.
You remember, others don't see her the way you do.
It's not so. You're rationalizing. You know, this is a nightmare.
To be perfectly frank, it is humiliating.
Oh, I'm gonna kill that magician. I'm gonna find that guy and I'm gonna dismember him, you know, and then I'm gonna sue him.
To tell you the truth, it is a little embarrassing.
God, I'm gonna kill myself. I'll kill myself.
I guess we could always move to another state.
Well, she'll float over. For God's sakes, look at her. She's the type that will float. I'm telling you, we're gonna have to live in the subway.
And I made him a sailor suit, and he looked just like a doll.
God, look, she's telling everybody in the city how cute I was at 10 years old. This morning she told the entire borough of Queens that I had a hiatus hernia.
What does he need with marriage, for goodness sake? And besides...
She's also saying things about me. At least she's your mother. You grew up with this kind of thing. I'm not used to it.
So then I said, Sheldon, why do you have to suck that blanket in bed, huh? And he cried and he said, oh, please, please don't take it away. Well, all through his childhood, he sucked that blanket and drove me crazy.
That's great. There was something in here that I hadn't noticed before, and it's very pertinent to the class that's going to go on not in February, but in March, about when Jews met Gentiles. See how Mia Farrow was separating herself from Woody, and when she's talking, she said, well, that was your mother, and you're used to that, but it wasn't the way that I grew up. Very, very interesting point there that I'm sure Woody Allen's had a lot of personal and professional experience with it. I can't overemphasize the importance of all the Jews in the entertainment business in terms of our being able to see these movies and see this kind of life that we're leading in America. We've talked about the studio heads, but you think about the writers, like Woody Allen, who's both writer and director in all his films, and Philip Roth, who's Goodbye Columbus and Portnoy's Complaint, were both brought to the screen. And one of his other books, The Humbling, is in a movie with Al Pacino that's going to be opening just later on this month. And to see the influence that these entertainers have, I think it's very instructive to look at the life and career of Barbra Streisand. When she first came to Hollywood, she brought with her the Broadway musical that had made her famous, which was called Funny Girl. It's based on the life of Fanny Brice, a musical comedian in the 1920s who was famous for songs like Secondhand Rose and My Man, Streisand became very identified with those songs herself later on. And so that was made into this wonderful movie, Funny Girl, and there was a glimpse of the kind of life that a famous entertainer, Jewish entertainer, would have led in the 20s. And then when we do the When Jews Meet Gentiles, The Way We Were, it takes up what happens when a Jew with curly hair and a funny nose falls for the perfect goy, played by Robert Redford. And I'm sure we all affectionately remember that scene. In the clip we're about to see, this is obviously a much later point in Ms. Streisand's career. She's seen here with Seth Rogen, who has become infamous, I guess, for The Interview, which he wrote and directed and stars in, and has been all over the media for the last several weeks. But in here, he plays Barbra Streisand's son. And the scene you're going to see, he has been on a business trip, and he comes back to see his mother and to offer her a proposition. One of the things that's kind of interesting is that Streisand, they end up taking a road trip together, but Streisand only agreed to do the part if they stay within an hour of her house. So there are a lot of places on the road trip were near Santa Monica, but they had to be made to look different. So she was still playing the Jewish princess in that role as well. So let's look at her as a Jewish mother.
It's just the way you like them, and I used turkey bacon, which was on sale, but I know it's still good. I'm always concerned for your health, right? You know, I was up all night last night because I was thinking about your problems, Andy. Jessica was your first serious relationship, so let's start with her. I remember when you broke up, but I can't remember why. Do you remember? Okay, we'll skip Jessica for now. What do you think we should do tonight, honey? Oh, you know what? You have to remind me to get Tylenol later, because I'm running low. And I also told Gail that I would pick some up for her. Did I remember to call Gail back? I don't know what's happening to me. I'm getting forgetful. I hope it's not...
You want to come on a trip with me, Mom?
Huh?
My road trip that I'm going on. It's long, and thought maybe I could use some company in the form of you.
You want to drive cross-country in a car with me?
Yeah. No, it's, you know, we won't be gone long. It's only 8 days in a car together, and then I got to be in San Francisco. My last meeting is in San Francisco now.
What happened to Vegas?
I got a new meeting last night in San Francisco.
Oh.
So, yeah. What do you say?
If this is you worrying about me, Andy, you don't have to, because Mommy's fine.
That's not at all what it is, Ma.
What?
I've had such a good time hanging out with you these last few days. I thought it would be fun to hang out even more and spend time with you.
Wait a minute. I want to make sure that I'm hearing this correctly. You want to spend a week in a car with your mother. Is that what I heard?
More than anything in the world.
Don't you think I would drive you crazy? Don't you think I might get on your nerves a little bit?
No, you know what? It was just a thought, and if you don't want to do it, then fine. I don't want to push you in.
What? Am I so awful that you can't spend a little time in a car with me?
Jesus Christ, Ma, how'd you turn this around? I just invited you to come. I'm inviting you. Do you want to come with? Do you want to drive across the country with me?
Well, I'd have to reroute my mail.
Okay.
I'd have to miss my book club.
Ma, you have 5 seconds to tell me whether you want to go or not, and then I'm revoking my offer, okay?
Okay.
Are you coming?
1, 2. I can't wait! What, are you kidding me? Honey, that is so exciting!
Good, I am.
Tatala!
Okay.
Oh my God!
Okay.
The sweetest! Look at this one! I love you! Oh my God! I can't believe I have to call Gail! Oh my God! I'll have to retouch my roots though before I go. What are we gonna pack? You gotta fill me on all the weather conditions in all the states that we're gonna go through.
You have to think that the preponderance of Jewish American princesses has been sort of a direct outgrowth of the financial success of Jews in the 50s and 60s and 70s. It's interesting to note in these movies that the father almost always plays a role. He showed pampering his little girl long after she stops being little. A classic example of this is Dirty Dancing, with when Jerry Orbach wonderfully played the father to Jennifer Grey, and was just so protective of her throughout the entire film, and sees his daughter sort of stretching out and becoming a person in her own right during that film. And there were other films when Goldie Hawn, Ally McGraw played the Jewish mother. They're all very pretty, and they're all the result of good genes and maybe all the money they need to play around with Mother Nature as well. McGraw is a very good example as Brenda Patenkin in The Goodbye Columbus. She's a snooty Radcliffe student home for the summer in an affluent suburb with her parents. When Philip Roth wrote this, he made the point that very clear that she had her nose done because her boyfriend, this Jewish guy who is way beneath her on the socioeconomic ladder there, notices that she's careful not to rush the net for fear of damaging her nose. These girls are the spoiled daughters, whiny, materialistic, and shallow, but while they may rebel and stray from their parents' homes and dreams, mainly they end up marrying a Jewish professional in the end, and they're usually back in the nest that their family amply provides for them. Film historian Nathan Abrams points out that these women are perceived differently in the 21st century than they were in the last century. They are now more likely to be perceived as smart, not dumb. And I wanted to bring you an example of this. So this is from a film called Kissing Jessica Stein, which was made in 2001. The interesting twist on this is that it's kind of a lesbian movie, and Jessica Stein becomes more acquainted with the side of herself as the movie goes on. I want to make clear that I did not include this movie because I didn't think we have enough Steins on the stage here. It's not the reason. And so we see her in the scene here where she meets another woman, and she's really denying this part of herself. She's a successful journalist. She doesn't have a boyfriend. She can take care of herself. And so it's sort of interesting to think, well, what would it be like if there were two Jewish American princesses in a relationship? I hadn't thought about that before. So let's take a look. This is Jennifer Westfeldt's movie. She wrote and directed it, and she also stars as Jessica. So let's take a look.
Jessica? Jessica? Hi! Hi! I was just looking for you.
Helen.
Right. Hi.
Hi.
To meet you. I'm sorry I'm so late. I
don't worry
I'm
about it.
always
Come
late. I
sit.
hope you didn't wait long.
No, well, I was just starting to get worried that maybe you weren't going to show at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Helen, right, gosh, I should have said this on the phone, and I didn't, and I'm sorry that I didn't, but you should really know that this isn't me.
It isn't?
Not at all. I'm sorry.
Taxi! Shit. Which part of it isn't you?
Oh, all of it.
So why did you...
You know what, the truth is I've been trying to be a little less me lately, and that's why but really I'm still me. See?
I see. Well, look, we don't have to do a whole big... We could just get a drink, you know?
I don't think so.
Taxi! Oh, come on. You don't want to go to your dinner so frazzled.
Oh, my dinner. Right.
Yeah, I think a little red wine would really help to,
Look, you seem really nice. I made a mistake. I have to go.
Oh my God. I'm sorry.
No, God.
You know what?
Let me help you.
I missed my yoga class this morning, and I'm not my usual centered self.
Do you do yoga regularly? Is that something?
Yeah, every day, actually. I find it keeps me really strong and energized and usually graceful.
Right. I've heard that. So.
Have you never tried it?
Oh, no. No, I don't think I could sit still and breathe for long. I'd panic.
Oh, so what do you like to do for exercise?
Oh, I like basic exercise. I like to run or walk, just keep moving, you know? I feel like as long as I'm moving, I'm safe.
What do you do when you're sleeping?
Oh, I'm a terrible insomniac.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Since when?
I don't know, birth.
Well, listen, if you ever change your mind and want to try a class, I'd be happy to...
I don't think so.
Well, don't decide right now. Just let it marinate for a while.
Okay, I will let it marinate. I'm never gonna get a cab.
Maybe just one drink.
Okay, I'd like 20 minutes.
Well, but wait. This Larry, that must have been pretty serious, huh? He proposed.
No, I mean, no, it was.
Well, what happened?
It wasn't right. He just wasn't funny, you know?
Oh,
I think that's been my big thing. Not smart or not funny. Or not smart and not funny. Or smart, but funny in a totally unappealing way, you know? Just like funny stupid or funny dopey, but not funny witty or funny ironic or funny goofy, you know? Or they seem smart, and then you realize that they aren't at all, and that's funny, but funny, tragic. So anyway, if you're then lucky enough to find someone who's the good kind of smart and the good kind of funny, then generally they're just kind of
ugly.
Ugly, I'm sorry. Yes, a little. That's awful. Right?
No, ugly doesn't do it for you. That's okay. I mean, I'm kind of into ugly.
What?
As long as it's sexy ugly.
Sexy ugly? Define.
Well, you can. It just is, you know. Sexy ugly.
Okay, well, could you give me a celebrity who would fall into the category?
Yeah. Hold on a second. I'll get you in.
Angelica Houston? Is that kind of the right idea?
Yeah, I guess. I was gonna say Mick Jagger.
Oh.
He's the big one. Oh, Lyle Lovett, James Woods, Harvey Keitel. Very sexy ugly.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you're not, I mean, you've tried, you've dated men.
Of course.
Oh, good. I'm relieved. I assumed that you had.
Oh, I have. Also.
Oh.
Yeah, I just find a lot of different things sexy.
Oh, I don't.
So, should we settle the tab?
What?
Yeah, it's 8:10. Don't you have a...
No.
You don't?
No.
But I thought...
I lied.
I know a great Indian place.
It's a very sweet movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely worth seeing. So now we're moving on to the altar cocker. And how do you define that person? A Yiddish dictionary says it's an old and complaining person, and goes into more detail, someone who sits around grousing all the time. He's made his appearance in movies in recent decades, not seen much of him earlier because you have to be fairly affluent to aspire to that condition. Miami Beach is a natural habitat for the altar cocker. When Jews took over the place as a retirement base before it became too expensive for there to live there, you see a lot of old men who would be appearing on the screen. There was a movie a couple years ago called Last Vegas, and although only two of the characters are supposed to be Jewish, played by actual Jews, Kevin Kline and Michael Douglas, all four childhood friends could be described this way. Kline has a hilarious line. He's living in Florida, and he calls his pals to say, "It's 4:15 and I'm in a dinner party." Walter Matthau sort of owns this role, and he appears in both the movies we're going to see clips from. In both, he's retired. The awkward way he walks defines him, and his expressions as well, such as his use of holy moly a lot. And in this first clip, we're going to see grumpy old men. Anne Margaret, for some reason, moves across the street from him in a freezing town in Minnesota. This movie is from 1983, and it was followed by a sequel called Grumpier Old Man, in which Sophia Loren also pops into town. So there's no mistake. His name, Walter Matthau's name in the movie is Max Goldman, and he takes out a lot of his anger on his waspy neighbor, played by Matthau's longtime friend Jack Lemmon. They're always spying and complaining about each other, and they call each other dickhead and moron. So in this scene here, you're going to see how Walter Matthau has just met he's seen this phenomenally looking woman, Anne Margaret, and he's been invited into her house. So go ahead.
Holy moly! Look at all the crap you get. Excuse me, the stuff you got here.
Where's my inspiration?
You did? You're an artist?
I try. I used to teach courses in expressionism at Berkeley, but now I'm back to the classics of literature.
Berkeley, that explains it. Oh my God!
What?
Your TV! It's got no guts!
I took them out.
How could you do that to a 54 Super Zenith? This TV is a classic. I could fix it for you, though, if you wanted me to. That's what I used to do. I was a TV repairman.
Oh, that's so sweet, Max. But, you know, I think it works quite well, just the way it is.
The hell does she see any shows? Holy moly.
I see you've met Ernest.
Who?
The model was my husband. Boy, he sure wasn't pleased about modeling in the nude. Took quite a bit of prompting, I must say.
He's,
Passed on. 5 years ago. Would you like some coffee?
Nah.
Cream or sugar?
Nah. Oh. Sure moved around a lot the last few years, didn't you?
Yeah, I think it's exciting to experience new things, new places, and meet new people. Like you. Do you paint?
Paint?
Yeah.
Me?
Uh-huh.
Sure do. I paint the shed every spring.
No.
You get it?
I get it, I get it. No, I mean, you know, pictures, paintings.
What for?
Everyone needs some form of release.
I fish.
Fish? Fish. Oh. Yeah, fish. Oh, yeah. I can see the beauty in that.
Yeah? Miss Troy, would you do me the honor of accompanying me to my ice shanty tomorrow?
I'd be honored.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Be careful.
We're having a heat wave, a tropical heat wave. We're having a heat wave, a biddly-doo.
I love Walter Matthau. I miss him. So finally, the last clip we're going to see is The Sunshine Boys, based on a Neil Simon play. You know, once again, a lot of Jews in the entertainment industry, and these are the movies that we're seeing. It's the story of two old vaudevillian comics who once were a very famous duo, sort of like Martin and Lewis. They grew to hate each other, and they haven't been together in ages. A comedy producer wants them to do a sketch for a big new show, and a relative of one of them tries to get them to agree. Matthau was set to play the more ornery of the two for this movie, and Jack Benny was to play the other. Sadly, Benny got cancer and was too sick to act in the movie, but he generously promoted George Burns for the role. Burns won an Oscar and had a second wind as an actor and entertainer because of this film. Here they're trying to rehearse a number that they had done 50 years ago. Mathau is much too young for the role, and the aging makeup they put on him makes him look like a bum, but he's still very funny. They're both very funny, so have a look.
Do you want to rehearse the sketch or not? What?
You're not against rehearsing?
I'm against doing the show. Rehearsing is important.
All right, let's rehearse. Why don't we move the furniture around and make the set?
Wait a minute. What the hell are we doing here?
I'm fixing up the set. I don't know what you're doing.
You're fixing up the set?
That's right.
You're fixing up the set for the doctor sketch?
Oh, the doctor sketch.
Wait a minute! God damn it! We're doing the same damn thing! Are we fixing up for the doctor sketch, or are you redecorating my apartment?
I know what I'm doing. I did this sketch for 43 years.
And what was I doing all that time? Taking a smoke?
Can we please fix up for the doctor sketch? My clothes are beginning to stink from this apartment.
All right. If you think you know how to fix it up, you fix it up.
It'll be my pleasure. There. That's the doctor sketch.
For how much? That's the gypsy chiropractor sketch.
You're positive?
I'm more than positive, I'm sure.
All right, wise guy. Show me the doctor sketch.
There. That's the doctor sketch.
You know what you are, Willie? You're a 73-year-old putz.
Right. Only the putz didn't drive in all the way from New Jersey.
I didn't drive. My daughter did. Now, can we please rehearse the sketch?
All right, go outside. I'm here in the doctor's office.
Gonna do the part with the nurse first.
Do you see a nurse here? How can I rehearse with a nurse that's not here?
Don't ask me. I'm a putz.
Let's forget the nurse. Start with the part where I'm in the office and you come in.
All right, I'll start from where I come in. Knock, knock, knock. I'm looking for the doctor.
First, go outside.
I could be home playing solitaire now. All right, I'm outside. Knock, knock.
Wait a minute. You're not outside the door. Go out the door.
We're just rehearsing. Can't you make believe that I'm outside the door?
Sure, if you were a better actor.
Sorry my daughter ever bought that car. Listen, we're not going to stop for every little thing, are we? I don't know how many years I got left. I don't want to spend them rehearsing.
We're not going to stop for the little things. We're going to stop for the stupid things. Not going out the door is a stupid thing.
Coming here in the first place was the stupid thing. All right, I'm going out. If I'm outside, my daughter calls, tell her to pick me up in 20 minutes.
Just now, for all I care. All right, give me a knock, knock, knock.
Knock, knock, knock.
Don't say it! For God's sake, do it!
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Give me a knock, knock, knock. Come in. Come in already.
It doesn't open. It's stuck.
All right, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
What's the matter?
Wait a minute.
Is it locked?
Not locked. Wait a minute. It's locked. Go downstairs and get somebody. Get the Spanish kid downstairs. Tell him it's locked.
What'd you say?
Go down and get somebody, for Christ's sake! Don't you understand English?
Don't you yell at me. I didn't lock the door.
Certainly you locked it. Why are you wasting time? Go down and get somebody!
It's open. What's the matter with you?
It's open from my side. You locked yours. All right, come in already. Come in.
So, we're going to do a Q&A, questions from you, and Peter's coming back.
So, thank you so much to Ruth. A hand. Right up that way. So, Ruth and Peter are now available, and all you have to do is put up your hand. It doesn't have to do with the clips they showed, but any questions you have about the subject, observations you have, we would love to hear from you. So just put up your hand and we'll come to you. Anybody? Questions, comments, observations? Yes, right here.
Good afternoon, thank you. I was just curious about the jazz singer, why they did speak during that, but then they went back to that silent movie aspect of it. Thank you.
I don't know the technical question, the technical answer, but I have a feeling that the answer is in fact technical. The expense of recording and then distributing, that is creating the copies of the film with the audio track, was extravagant at the time, and it may have just been simply the most cost-efficient means of making the big move, which was to make sure that people saw and heard talking pictures. It quickly was I think within about 2 years you had films that were talkies throughout, maybe even faster than that. And if there were other people who know more specifically, but my understanding is that the technology, particularly remember every single theater had to be equipped with speakers, audio projection. And so it was, I think, a technology question.
We just have one more question, and then I know you all have been sitting for a long time, so we are going to end the program. But I do want you to remember we have 3 more sessions like this, and we hope we'll see you. So, Becky, if you want to take the last question.
Can I just say something about that?
Yes, say something.
The next one, I gave it a title that I realized was maybe not fully enough descriptive. It's called Hollywood's Double Take. I think it's March 1st, maybe? It's beginning of March. What it actually is taking a look at how Hollywood depicted and also avoided depicting the Holocaust, starting already in the late 30s. And so it's got a funny title, but it ties in a way into our topic today, because one of the reasons that many of the Jewish stereotypes, quote unquote, that we looked at today are kind of affectionate and fun. We may cringe a little bit at some of them, but the fact is almost none of the things that we think about as being like the Shylock kind of stereotype existed in the movies at all. And it's not just because people were PC or that we had advanced our thinking as a film culture, because there are plenty of stereotypes that exist, particularly of African Americans, that exist even to today. But this is where we have to credit, I think, the number of Jews who were in fact responsible for creating and distributing the movies. They were extremely protective, for better for worse, usually for better, protective of the image of Jews as portrayed in the movies. So.
And Ruth, before we take this one last question, do you have anything you want to tell the folks who are here today about any of the upcoming sessions?
I mentioned it a couple of times, but I am doing a really fun segment on what an interfaith marriage is, or when Jews meet Gentiles. And, again, this is very because of the time these films came out, the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, what was happening in society is that these kinds of relationships were becoming much more prominent. And now we don't see movies about that because it's like no big deal. Everybody's been assimilated. But they're wonderful, wonderful movies. And one of my favorites, The Heartbreak Kid, with Charles Grodin and Sybil Shepherd and Jeannie Berlin. If you haven't seen it, you'll want to see it after you see the clips because it so much gets the two different cultures and what's going on. Eddie Albert plays Sybil Shepherd's extremely wasp father. And the difference between the cultures is just, the way it's portrayed is hilarious. So I hope you'll come to all of our remaining ones.
And the last question?
Okay, when I was younger, 10, 15, when I went to the movies, when there was a happy thing, they always played like, wedding music, more, that with dancing and singing and everything, the klezmer, I think. And then if there was a sad moment, then it was like funeral music. And I used to be, I think I was about 9 or 10, I said, gee, my whole life is going to be weddings and funerals. It doesn't make sense. Thank you. But that's the way it was then. They never really, they never really understood what Jewish life was about, except, one or the other. Either you were at a funeral or you were at a wedding.
Well, I hope that this series takes you beyond that. And thank you. Thanks to all of you for coming. We hope to see you back. Thanks to you, Ruth and Peter. It was wonderful. Thank you.